So perhaps let's get started. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar and thank you for joining. And what we're going to do is to share with you today all of the new features of Zerto 9. And we're going to include some live demos. And as you can see, our theme is about ransomware. And as you know, we're all continuing to see attacks growing in severity and the scale of those attacks. And it just seems to be a constant in the press these days. Now, Zerto already delivers, unmatched ransomware recovery, RPOs and RTOs. And what we've done with Zerto 9 is to provide some significant new features to continue to help combat this growing risk and really help where legacy backup actually falls short. But first, before we carry on, let me introduce today's speakers. So first of all, that's me, Caroline Seymour, and I'm the VP of Product Marketing here. And joining me is Gijsbert Janssen van Doorn, who is the Director of Product Management. So hi, Gijs.
Hey, Caroline.
And well, actually, Gijs is going to do the majority of the hard work here with the live demos and so forth. But as we're going through the webinar, and perhaps just a little bit of a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, if you look at the right-hand side, the box on the right-hand side of your screen, there is the questions, and you can add your question, and we shall answer them at the end of the session at the Q&A side. So before we actually go into, say, the details of Zerto 9, I want to just talk a little bit more about the ransomware threats and where Zerto actually fits into combating the risks that are associated with ransomware. Now, the numbers that you actually see here are from a recent IDC study that we sponsored, and it is available for download on our website. And it is a survey of 500 organizations. And out of that 500 organizations, 95% said that they'd suffered a ransomware or malware attack. And so, when you look at it, that tells you that it's not a matter of if an attack will happen, but when. And then further, if you look at the details of that 95%, 80% indicated that at least one attack resulted in data corruption. And then 43% have experienced unrecoverable data within the last 12 months. And further in the report, when you read it, it states a lot of the reasons why, such as the backups have failed, they're unable to get back the data, or just the gaps between the backups, which means, lost data. And so as you see here, the risks are real and having significant impact to organizations. But if we also now look at the cost of ransomware, you can see here that it's an estimated 20 billion in cost in 2020 alone. And I wonder what it's going to be in 2021. And the average payout is increasing to over 300K. And to be honest, I think that's a little bit low from all that you see in the news these days. But it's not only about the payout when you're actually looking at the cost, to the business itself. It's also about the cost of recovery. And as you see here on the right-hand side, you can see in the fact that it's about an average of 1.4 million. And you have to take into the account of lost productivity, reputation, brand damage, as well as also service disruption. So all of these things are part and parcel of the cost of recovery. So now let's just take a moment to look at where does Zerto play to solve for ransomware. And so I would imagine a lot of you may have seen this before or are familiar with the NIST cybersecurity framework, and that stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And what it does is to help organizations to better understand, manage, and also reduce the cybersecurity threats. And when you look at the framework that you see here, what you can see is that Zerto's focus is really on that right-hand side, helping customers with the recovery phase. And so basically, once an attack has happened and the preventive measures that you've put in place have failed, and it will at some point, that's where we step in. And so just quickly, if we think about why Zerto for ransomware resilience, I mentioned earlier in the fact that we deliver unmatched ransomware recovery RPOs and RTOs with our continuous data protection. It provides a very granular recovery, so there is no data loss. And as we know, recovery is not just about the data, it's about the applications too. And you're able to recover these applications as a single consistent state and at scale. And one very important aspect is also to ensure that you can recover is the testing. And it's critical that you test and often. And so with Zerto, you can test often your recovery without any impact to production so that you're always ready if the inevitable happens. And of course, providing compliance reporting is key. So out-of-the-box analytics and reporting are also available. And so before I just hand over to Gijsbert, I just want to give an example of one customer. And this is Tenkate Protective Fabrics, and they are a multinational textile company that's based in Netherlands. And they suffered a CryptoLocker attack, and at the time, they had backup to tape and to disk. And in this instance, an entire file server was affected. And with that gap between the backups, they lost over 12 hours of data. And the time to recover, due to various different reasons, was about 2 weeks. And so the services that they provide are just way too critical, and the impact on revenue was totally unacceptable. And that's where CDP really changed the game. And so after the incident, they implemented Zerto. And so they shifted all of their BCDR strategy to Zerto's continuous data protection. So they replaced the use of their backup to tape and disk as their data protection strategy with Zerto's continuous data protection. And they were all set. And shortly afterwards, they were hit with a more advanced form of CryptoLocker. And instead of an entire file server being affected, only the actual directories of the server were affected. But they went from facing 12 hours minimum of data loss to only 10 seconds. And instead of taking, say, weeks to recover, the 2 weeks that they had before, it took less than 10 seconds. And so they went from weeks of recovery and hours of data loss to just a few seconds. Quite a story. But without further ado, what I'd like to do is hand you over to Gijsbert, because I'm sure you all want to hear about the new features that we've added with Zerto 9. Gijsbert?
Yes, thank you so much for this great setup, Caroline. And hopefully everybody can see my screen now. I tried to do it as smooth as possible. And let's dig into those features that we're delivering in Zerto 9. And let's start with focusing on our new recovery capabilities specifically for ransomware. Now, we've added support for cloud tiering and immutability to Zerto 9. That means we support immutable backups in AWS S3. We have added cloud storage auto tiering for all of our public cloud targets, being AWS S3 and Azure Blob Storage. And we've added support for new S3 compatible options. Now, that's great storing my backups on the most efficient target, but there's more. We also added instant recovery and protection. Instant recovery with regards to files. We can now recover files directly from any of our long-term retention repositories. We support instant VM restore from the journal, rewinding a single VM back to a few seconds ago within only a few minutes, just the start of a VM. And I'll actually be demoing that later on. And automated VM protection. Using vSphere tags, we can now automatically protect VMs based on those tags. So ensuring that no application is left unprotected. So let's look at that immutability feature that we're talking about. So with Zerto 9, we allow you to store your long-term retention backup copies in Amazon S3 and use the object lock feature within AWS to actually lock those backups. So basically the worm model. It's a write once, read many. So this allows you to protect or safeguard those backup data sets that you're storing within AWS S3 with the same retention policy that you're used to, or you can set a different option for immutability. So you want to keep an immutability for 30 days, or you want it to follow the retention policy. So it's flexible configuration there, and all managed from within the ZVM GUI. Of course, we added everything like audit logging that belongs to that as well. So really giving you that full feature set with regards to immutability, specifically in AWS S3 for now. Now, another very important step that we made in Zerto 8.5 is releasing the support for using public cloud storage as a long-term retention target. So we gave you the ability to store those long-term retention copies within more cost-effective cloud storage. Now with Zerto 9, we're going a step beyond that. So with Zerto 9, we give you the ability to automatically, based upon the policies that you set within Zerto, move data as it gets older into even more cost-effective storage options. So for Azure, for example, we can move it from hot to cool to archive. That means that the data that you're most likely never will recover to, or hopefully never will recover to, is stored on that most cost-effective storage tier within the cloud that you're using. And for AWS, we added the exact same thing. For AWS S3, we can move it from standard into infrequent access into Glacier. All automated, all managed from within Zerto, without any additional compute costs, because we're using those built-in features within the cloud. So really integrating deeply with those cloud targets. Now we also have support for new S3 compatible storage repositories, meaning that any repository that's based on S3 compatible storage, like Cloudium, for example, can now be used as a target for long-term retention copies. That could be Cloudian, that could be Wasabi. So we'll publish a list of the API calls that are required, that need to be supported by the endpoints. And as soon as they are compatible, you can use them as your long-term retention target, whether that's on premises or maybe at one of our managed service provider partners that have an S3 compatible offering for cloud storage. Now I mentioned instant recovery and file recovery from LTR targets. With Zerto 9, we give you the ability to recover VMs directly from the journal. Using Zerto's local continuous backup feature, we allow you to simply boot a new instance of a VM, like an actual restore from that journal within only a few minutes. So no more journal, no failovers, no remote site. We'll start the VM locally on production grade storage almost instantly. So this really allows you to really quickly recover from those ransomware attacks. Now, of course, we've had journal file level restores available in Zerto since 4.5, if I'm not mistaken. And we've added long-term retention into Zerto starting with Zerto 7. And with Zerto 9, we give you the ability to directly restore files from those long-term retention repositories, regardless where those repositories are, whether they're on premises or in the cloud. Now, it's great seeing all of this work on slides and in PowerPoint, but let's actually look at Zerto 9 and let me guide you through how those features work and where they are located in our UI. So here we are in Zerto 9.0, and let's take a look at the features we just discussed. Let's go into setup. Let's go into repositories, because most of the features I talked about, immutability, cloud tiering, are related to our long-term retention feature, and our long-term retention feature uses repositories to store the data on. So let's click new repository, and this is where I can actually show you all the settings you can now do that we've added to Zerto 9.0 with regards to immutability and tiering. So I'm selecting Amazon S3, and as you can see, there are two new options in the settings for Amazon S3, one of them being immutability. So I can now enable immutability simply by stating or enabling make all following retention sets immutable. You can either define your own setting let's say I want to keep every retention set immutable for 30 days, or I can allow it to follow the VPG retention policy. The second option you see is the tiering. So this allows me to set the time settings as in when data gets moved to a more cost-effective storage tier. So if you start in AWS S3 standard, we can move it after, in this example, 30 days to standard infrequent access. And then after 90 days, we're moving it into Glacier. Now, Zerto also supports storing long-term retention sets directly on standard infrequent access. Now, as soon as you already store it on infrequent access, this will simply be grayed out and it will only use the policy to move it into Glacier, as that's the most cost-effective storage tier. Now let's take a look at Azure. So Microsoft Azure Storage. Again, we've added tiering support for Azure. Same settings. Really easy to configure. Move it to cool access or to cool storage after 30 days, move it to archive after 90 days, or again, if I store it directly on cool first, this will be grayed out. The cool feature will be grayed out and it will only move it to archive. So it's really easy to use. The only thing you need to do is enable it. We talked about the support of S3 compatible storage. Here we go. You can simply select an endpoint. Region is optional, bucket name, access key, secret key, point it to your S3 compatible storage, which could be something on-premise or something at a managed service provider. It's S3 compatible. We, in the documentation, have a list of all the APIs that are required. If they meet those requirements, then you can start using those S3 compatible storage repositories as a long-term retention target. As you can see, really easy to configure and all available in Zerto 9.0. Now we also talked about new restore capabilities, and one of them being file level restores from long-term retention targets. So let's look at that. So I click restore, go to file, select the VM I want to recover files from. In my case, I'll select the file server. Makes sense, I'm recovering a file from a file server. Click next, and now I can select the point in time. Now, as I want to show the file level restore of a repository, I will make sure that the source is the repository and not the journal. We've had journal file level restores in the product since version 4.5, but now we've added support for long-term retention. Let's focus on the long-term retention piece. As you might notice, the workflow, the wizard is exactly the same. So I'm starting the mount, so mounting all the file systems that are part of that VM. And as soon as it's mounted, mounting is in progress right now, I can browse that file system and restore files, one, directly back to its source, to the source VM, to the source file system, or I can download those files. The exact same features that you're used to from our file level restore from the journal. So now I click browse, go through the things I want to recover, for example, the shares folder, click next. Now I've got two options. I can, one, download the file. So we'll start compressing it. I can save it or restore to its original location using the credentials, which are actually managed through Zerto as well. So I can add credentials to Zerto. They're stored encrypted in our database. And this is what we use to authenticate with that source VM to restore the actual files to its original location. As easy as that. Like I said, exactly the same as you're used to from our journal file level restores. Now let's look at the instant VM restore, something we've added in Zerto as well in Zerto 9.0. It's the ability to instantly restore a VM from the journal. Difference between this and a failover is that it recovers it locally. It doesn't impact the VPG, so there's no journal reset. It actually creates another VM as a restore. So let's go into the restore workflow. Go into restore. I'm going to select VM, restore VM. I'm going to use this same file server. Click next. And now I can select a point in time. Again, this point in time could be in the journal or could be in a repository. Now, because we want to do an instant restore, we have to do it from the journal, because the journal resides on local storage, on production grade storage. That allows me to really quickly restore it. Like it says, instant restore. Now I can configure some settings for the restore. For example, what needs to be the name of the VM that I'm restoring. So I'm going to call it WinFSO1 restored. I'm going to restore it on this host, or it's going to run on this host, and I'm going to restore it in this data store. I am going to use a manual commit policy. Users of Zerto are used to the commit policy. It's basically a safeguard to a failover, but it's also a safeguard for the restore as well. Let's say I restore at the wrong point in time, simply roll back and restart that restore. Because it's instant, it's really quickly. I want to shut down my source VM. I can actually change the network I'm restoring it in. I can even change the IP address. I can add a new MAC address. So those are part of like some of the automation steps, or the customization steps I can take during a restore. Click next, and there we go, instant restore. So I click instant restore. Now, as we can see, and I'll switch to VMware right now, it starts to shut down that VM. So WinFSO1, the original VM, that's completed. As soon as that's completed, boom, there we go, WinFSO1 restored. That's the name I said it needed to have. So it creates that VM with that name. As soon as it's done, it starts it and it's running. So this is how fast that instant restore is. And again, if you go and look at the VPG right now, the VPG is still running. It's still protecting the original VM. There's no impact to the journal. If there were multiple VMs in this VPG, there's no impact to them. And I can now go either commit that restore or roll it back. The VM is running right now. I can use it. It is kind of in production. It's just I haven't committed to this actual restore yet. Now in my case, I'm going to roll it back. So I click roll back. It starts rolling it back. What happens is it will delete the restored VM, will shut it down, and it will restart the WinFSO1, basically returning it back to how it needs to be. So I've guided you through the long-term retention features we've added, cloud tiering and support for S3 compatible, immutability for AWS. And I've shown you the workflows for restoring files directly from long-term retention targets, and also the instant VM restore capabilities we've added in Zerto 9.0. So let's look at some other features we've got in Zerto 9. As you all know, seeing is believing. You just saw it in Zerto 9. All the great new features that we're delivering really focused on ransomware recovery. But let's take a look at the broader solution. Let's look at Zerto as a platform for your data protection needs. And many of you would probably know the traditional 3-2-1 rule within data protection. That means 3 copies on 2 different media types, and one of them needs to be on a remote location. Now, with Zerto and the new capabilities and our ability to instantly recover, we'll be basically modernizing that 3-2-1 approach by actually providing more options for more copies, for more remote sites, and include on-premises and the cloud within that. Now, your first source of recovery would be the journal. So continuous journaling powered by our continuous data replication really provides you with thousands of recovery points that are only seconds apart. And that's seconds versus hours, right? We all know snapshots. We all know that we're taking snapshots once every few hours, and actually most of the times once every 24 hours. Now, that's locally, so Zerto can create a local copy, but we can extend that to a remote site. And you have the same RPOs measured in seconds, the same granularity measured in seconds, but on a remote site. And because of those strict SLAs and because of those enterprise level SLAs, we can protect you from any type of disaster. Add long-term retention to that, and long-term retention on inexpensive secure cloud storage, we can easily make you compliant for like data retention requirements, whether you want to store them for months or years, or we can also easily recover you from that different recovery source. Now, with the journal, you can replicate up to 3 different sites. That's better than 3 copies somewhere else. It's 3 copies on 3 different remote locations, and combining that with long-term retention really helps you go way beyond that 3-to-1 backup strategy that you're used to. And really combining all those technologies together, we really provide you with those multiple options for recovery. Whether you want to recover from a hot site, a warm site, cool storage, we basically got you covered for any of those scenarios. And again, with Zerto continuous data protection, we really allow you to deliver and meet those SLAs that recovery and modern organizations need from a recovery perspective. Now, there was one more thing that I talked about as well, and that was automated VM protection. Now, automated VM protection really allows you to leave no application unprotected, because automated VM protection allows you to automatically protect VMs as soon as they get added to your environment. And we're using native vSphere tags for that. So a system admin or a virtualization administrator can simply create a VM, make sure it gets the right tag, and based upon those tags, Zerto will automatically configure the VM for protection. And we're doing that based on predefined virtual protection groups, making sure that we protect them against the SLAs that we require. So without further ado, I don't want to bore you too much with slides. Let's dig into that actual demo of automated VM protection. So automated VM protection. Let's look at how I enable it, how I configure it, and how I can actually use it. So let's start with enabling Zerto for automated VM protection. The only thing I need to do is I need to go into site settings, go to workload automation, and enable auto protection using VMware vSphere tags. So it's already enabled for mine, for my installation. Save it, and we're set. We're now monitoring unprotected VMs, checking them for tags, and based upon those tags, we'll automatically protect them. So what do these tags look like? So let's go into vSphere. Let's go into the tags and custom attributes, and there we go. So I've created 3 tags, and they're all, and this is important, under the Zerto protection automation category. The name actually determines how they will be protected and what the name will be of the virtual protection group that we either add them to or the virtual protection group that we create. So the first part, before the colon, so for example, this one, cloud dr :dc. So cloud dr is the VPG that we're going to use as a template. So what basically happens is I have a VPG in Zerto called cloud dr, and as soon as I use that name in my tag, the new VPG created will be using the same settings as the cloud dr VPG has. So it copies the settings of the cloud dr. So I could have called cloud dr gold cloud as well. And this one is actually pre-configured to replicate into Azure. So as soon as I tag a VM with cloud dr :dc, it will create a new VPG called cloud dr _dc. DC is more of a descriptive name. So in my case, I'm going to protect a domain controller. That's why I called it DC. So it will add that VM to the VPG cloud _dc, or it will create that VPG for me, again, based on the settings of this existing cloud dr VPG I already have. As you can see, this one is configured for remote replication into Azure. It has certain SLA settings, journal settings, all these kind of things. So these are the settings that the new VPG will have as well. So let's actually look at it. Let's tag a VM and let's see if it will automatically protect it. So I am going to add a tag to the DC02 VM. Now I am going to call it Cloud DR, or I'm going to tag it with the Cloud DR DC tag, which again means that it will create or add the VM to a VPG that is based on the settings of Cloud DR. So what happens now is Zerto is monitoring tags. It's basically looking for new tags that are added to unprotected VMs. And as soon as it finds that tag, it's going to look first, do I have a VPG that matches that tag? Do I have a VPG called clouddr_DC? If it doesn't find that one, it will create that VPG and add the VM to it. If the VPG already exists, it will simply add that new VM to that VPG. And that VPG could be anything. Could be a VPG that's replicating to Azure, could be a remote replication to VMware, to Hyper-V, to AWS, could be a local replication for backup purposes. So it would simply take all the settings from that VPG. So you can automate protection into the cloud. You can automate protection into your MSP. So you can actually benefit from all the features that are available in Zerto right now. So as soon as it's discovered the tags, that could take a few minutes, it will actually create that VPG. So let's wait for that to happen so you can actually see that it is happening. So, and as we can see, it's starting to create that VPG, cloud dr_DC. And if we go into that virtual protection group, we can see that the DC02, exactly the VM I tagged, is now protected within that VPG. This one's going into Azure, could be a local replication, could be a remote replication. But this automated VM protection really ensures that there's no application left unprotected. Now we've seen how easy it is to automatically protect your VMs. There's not much you need to do as a Zerto admin anymore. Just make sure that your environment is all set up for automated VM protection. But of course, we added way more to Zerto 9 than the features I just talked about. So we've added additional backup and DR capabilities to our platform. One of them is we simplified the way virtual protection groups are managed. One, by adding a new type of protection group, specifically for the local continuous backup use case, making it easier, requiring less steps to configure Zerto for your local continuous backup use case. But also things like the ability to mass edit certain settings within a virtual protection group, just making it easier to manage those protection groups. We've added backup reporting in Zerto Analytics. You can now go into Zerto Analytics and really deep dive on your retention jobs and see and troubleshoot or monitor exactly how the protection is running and operating right now, and giving you a better way to filter virtual protection groups based on use case. Now, another thing that we're adding in with Zerto 9 is new license management. Basically, a new way to manage Zerto licenses for security and scale. With Zerto, the new license management will really give you granular control and management of the licenses within your organization, really giving you the ability to self-service adding and renewal of licenses, and really giving you that full visibility into how licenses are consumed and deployed across all of your different sites. So basically giving you simple, scalable license management for both our end users and our managed service providers as well. Now that's a great segue into my next slide, because what are the enhancements that we did specifically for our MSPs, specifically helping them, making it easier for their end users to consume Zerto and to recover in case of an emergency? Now, we've added self-service file restore and download to the Zerto self-service portal. So really giving the tenants of our managed service providers the ability to recover files themselves using that self-service portal. We've added support for elastic virtual data centers in VMware Cloud Director, giving service providers more flexible deployment options from an infrastructure perspective. And we've refactored the way we recover our workloads into VMware Cloud Director, ensuring an even lower RTO than that people are already used to from us. So as you've seen, Zerto is jam-packed with new features. So let's quickly summarize all of those new features. We talked about cloud tiering. We talked about immutability, giving you the ability to safeguard your backups in AWS S3 using object logs. We give you the ability to automatically tier your long-term retention copies across the different and more cost-effective storage tiers within our public cloud targets, AWS S3 and Azure Storage Blobs. And of course, giving you the flexibility to use your own S3 compatible storage, like Cloudian, for example. We've also continued to update our platform and giving you better and easier ways to manage Zerto by simplifying the way we manage our virtual protection groups, by adding new reporting capabilities within Zerto Analytics to really dig down into your long-term retention and your backup copies, giving you the ability to filter VPGs according to your use case, and of course, adding new and more flexible license management. We talked about ransomware and instant recovery. We've added instant file restore from long-term retention, both for download and restoring directly back to production. Instant VM restore from Journal, giving you the ability to rewind a VM to how it was 5 seconds ago within mere minutes on production-grade storage. But from a restore perspective, I'm not talking failovers here for anyone that is familiar with Zerto. Now, making sure that no application is left unprotected by using automated VM protection with vSphere tags. And of course, helping our managed service providers really delivering that differentiating service with Zerto by allowing users to download and recover files themselves using our self-service portal, by integrating more deeply into VMware Cloud Director, the platform of choice for many of our MSPs, by adding support for Elastic VDC and refactoring the way we use Cloud Director and deliver an even better RTO. So as you can see, lots of great things in Zerto 9. Make sure you read the full release notes when it gets released, because trust me, there's more than this even to Zerto 9. And without further ado, I actually want to transfer it back to Caroline because she has some exciting other things to talk about.
Well, before we move on to that, and I will share with folks how to find more information about Zerto 9 as well, but I did want to highlight a significant announcement that was made earlier this month, if you hadn't already seen. This was an announcement that happened on July the 1st, and this is where HPE announced the intent to acquire Zerto. So we're absolutely thrilled and excited about this announcement, as they really do have a strong vision for that unified data ops. And as we look at the Zerto portfolio, it really fits well into it. And as we look at the acquisition itself, it really does expand the HPE GreenLake edge to cloud platform. And it really does help them on their journey to deliver upon their HPE storage's shift to a cloud native software-defined data services business. Now, what's very, very important here too is that Zerto absolutely will be available as you know it today, but in addition now, it's going to be available as a service through HPE GreenLake and also the Data Services Cloud Console. And to find out more, you can go to zerto.com. There is on the home banner the press release and also a blog that goes into more detail, and it has links so that you can find out more about what HPE GreenLake is, as well as also the Data Services Cloud Console that they announced at HPE Discover earlier this year, well, actually in June. And of course, we're going to be sharing more information over the coming months as the deal closes. So watch this space for this exciting announcement and the evolution of Zerto with HPE. And lastly, another announcement hot off the press. I'm really excited. Both Eyes and I are really excited about this one. And we want to share with everyone that we were named as a new entrant and positioned high in the niche quadrant of the Gartner Enterprise Backup and Recovery Software Solutions Magic Quadrant. And this is a significant achievement and validates us as a player in the backup space. And I just want to let you know that it actually gets even better, because since the publishing of this NQ, which is only just recently, and the evaluation period that they looked at Zerto itself, we have made some significant announcements with our Zerto for Kubernetes, so the backup and disaster recovery, as well as also the Zerto backup for SaaS, powered by Keep It. And then, of course, you've heard from Heidsberg all of the new capabilities that we're delivering through Zerto 9, like the immutability and the cloud tiering and the new backup management capabilities. And so all of this, and also what we're planning to release throughout the year, should move our position further up and over in the quadrant. So we're really, really excited that our approach to backup and recovery is changing and also challenging the more traditional vendors. And customers are starting to really see the significant benefits replacing legacy solutions with Zerto. So I can't, say enough about how excited we are about this. And you can visit Zerto.com and read the full report. So lastly, before we go to Q&A, where can we find out more about Zerto 9? And so you can check out all the features, Zerto.com/Zerto-9. If you can't remember that, just go to Zerto.com. It'll be one of the banners, and it'll take you to the landing page where it's got all of the information that you need that Heis has actually shared, and a data sheet that'll go through all of the Zerto 9 new capabilities. But also, I want to bring attention to the hands-on lab, because we have a hands-on lab that's in Zerto 9 that allows you to test drive recovering from ransomware. And it's a self-paced, on-demand lab, and you can do it at any time that you want, so you need no hardware or anything like that. You can do it at the leisure of your at home. But it's a great way to see how quickly you can recover from ransomware with Zerto. And you can just go to Zerto.com/labs. So I just wanted to put those two CTAs. And so I guess with that, I see that we have several questions. And I think what I'd like to do now is turn it over, and Heis and I will open it up for the Q&A and answer some of the questions that have come through.
And with that, I'd actually like to start answering the questions straight away. And one specific question really popped out for me, so I'll answer that one first. And it's a question about RPOs and RTOs. So what are the RPOs and RTOs that Zerto can achieve? Now, because Zerto uses continuous data protection and protects changes that as they occur, we can achieve RPOs of seconds. So typically that's, I always say sub 20 seconds. And because of all the automation and orchestration we have built in, we can achieve RTOs of minutes. Because the only thing we need to do is, in an orchestrated manner, start the VM. As the storage is already available, as the copy is already available, we can do that almost instantly. So RTOs would be measured in minutes.
Yeah, I've been looking at the questions here. So let me read through some of them. There were a couple of questions about a copy of the presentation that we've just done. I should have mentioned that too, that we will be providing that after the event, and this will be actually recorded. So if you have other people who want to hear this webinar, then we'll be sharing the on-demand. But actually, a lot of these questions, I would say, probably are for you actually. But so let's talk what about VM level recovery from cloud to on-prem?
So that's a very interesting question. So yes, I've only shown file level recovery from cloud to on-prem, but anything that Zerto has protected and stored on our cloud repositories is recoverable as well. So you can recover files, you can recover VMs, you can recover groups of VMs. So anything that we have stored and protected in the cloud can be recovered to on-prem as well.
That's great. There was another question about license required to use immutable storage and backup to cloud, and so that's our Enterprise Cloud Edition license. That's correct, isn't it, Heis? I'm not making a mistake there.
So the immutability could be used using our Zerto data protection license as well, because that's related to long-term retention. Yes.
Yeah. So there's that, and then do you need to invest in hardware, or is this a SaaS-based product?
So it's actually a software-only product. So and the way we scale is by scaling with the production environments. So that's the beauty actually of our solution and of the way we architected it. It's we don't require any dedicated hardware that you need to manage. That's only for us. No, we just install small purpose-built appliances on the production environment, and we scale with the production environment to achieve the protection and to protect at any scale. So no additional hardware. Of course, you need storage to store the copies. You need storage to store it in the cloud, but from a compute perspective, we don't require anything dedicated to us because we just scale with a production environment.
Quick easy one here is when is expected release date of V9? It is actually released, so if you go to my customers can go to my Zerto and download it. It is actually available. So this is the launch today. Availability is today. There was several more questions here. How much time? Oh, we're doing good. So there was also I'd like to ask some specific questions answered on Zerto 9, and as I mentioned a little earlier, that there is a landing page, a whole microsite around Zerto 9, so please take a look at that. But if you want to, send a question to me, caroline.seamer@zerto.com, and happy to pass that on. But obviously your account manager or your local SC would be able to answer any specific questions as it relates to your own environment. There was also a question, Heis, about, we've obviously announced our immutability for AWS, but what about Azure?
So we're in close contact with Microsoft, and we know they are working actively on delivering the same capabilities and the same APIs or similar APIs that are available in AWS. As soon as those are actually available, GA, we'll be incorporating that into Zerto as well, ensuring that we can do immutability in Azure blob storage as well.
Great. And when you were doing the demo, Heis, somebody actually noticed that in the CVM you have a pair site called Boston and Arnhem. What are those, and it doesn't look like AWS or Azure? They paid great attention to my demo. So Boston is Zerto headquarters. Arnhem is my hometown. And actually they represent VMware sites, because besides Azure and AWS, Zerto also supports replication into another VMware site. As long as there's VMware, there's storage, and there's a vCenter, we can replicate to it or replicate from it. So it's all bi-directional. So those were actually 2 VMware sites in my own lab. Great. Does Zerto support Kubernetes, include a VMware Tanzu environment? It's right up your street, Heis.
Yes, that's a great question. So Zerto recently, earlier this year, released Zerto for Kubernetes. And with Zerto for Kubernetes, we offer all the same capabilities that people are used to from our VMware and Hyper-V and cloud solution, but now for Kubernetes workloads. In that first release, we support OpenShift, we support EKS, AKS, IBM Kubernetes solutions, Google Cloud, Kubernetes Engine, and in our upcoming release, which is later this year, we're hoping to support VMware Tanzu as well as Rancher. So we are still actively developing it. But we're looking at a release for VMware Tanzu support somewhere later this year.
Great. And there was an interesting question, which I think could be good for everybody in the sense that obviously nobody's online right now, but there's a island partner actually, and they purchase Zerto licensing through them, and they support Zerto 8 currently, and will Zerto 8 provide the instant ransomware recovery that Zerto 9 will? So I know today we announced some significant features, but we have for quite some time now been supporting ransomware recovery. I don't know whether you want to add more color around that, Heis.
No, you're absolutely right. Our CDP engine, our journaling technology is being delivered by our partners as well. So they can definitely make use of that and recover to merely seconds ago in the data centers of our partners. As those partners slowly but surely upgrade to Zerto 9 as well, they will get those additional capabilities. And I would recommend reaching out to your partner about their roadmap of delivering those kind of services within their data centers, because they will be able to give you a better answer than I can. But from a ransomware recovery perspective, we've always been doing very well with our journaling and CDP engine right now. So that's definitely something you can benefit from.
Great. So let me have a look here. That's quite a long question, but does instant VM restore from journal require one-to-many replication? It expands it out a little bit more if you see the question, Heis.
Yep, I saw the question. So right now in Zerto 9, instant VMware recovery is available for a new VPG type. And that VPG type does a local replication. So that replicates it to a local copy. So we're not pulling data from a remote site. It's a local replica with a local journal. That's where we recover from. Now, on our roadmap, we definitely are aiming to support the instant restores on remote sites as well. But right now, it's available for those what we call local continuous backup protection groups. And that's where you can perform that instant restore from, not from the remote journal right now. But please don't hesitate to reach out to your local team to get more familiar with that, or for them to run you through a demo. But that's the way it's delivered in Zerto 9.
Right. And so there's another question here about performance impact to local storage. Talking about local storage for near instant recovery points.
So yeah, great question. So as we replicate it locally, that means it requires a local replicate and a local journal. But as we start that VM, it's similar to when that VM would be running from your local repository or your local data store as is. So basically, we're just starting that VM, reading the data from the data store that those disks and the journal is on. And that's the performance impact. And and everything we do is focused on actually avoiding performance impact and avoiding the impact through your production system. So whenever you protect something locally, yes, it needs a data store and it needs storage to protect it on. So there's a performance impact there. But as soon as you start it, it just reads it from that data store directly. So that would be the normal IO pattern that you would see from a VM.
Great. How quickly can you restore from object storage?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't like answering questions with "it depends," but
Yeah,
it depends.
it does, doesn't it?
It depends on it's physics. It's how fast is your connection to the cloud. Of course, we will read it in a compressed manner, so that does save some time. But it needs to read all the data from that cloud repository and restore it. So it's actually a full restore. If you really want those fast recoveries, I would recommend looking at our local continuous backup features and the actual journal to do those fast recoveries from. We really consider cloud storage and long-term retention something like post 14 days or 30 days. So it's less likely you actually have to recover from those cloud copies, but it's there when you actually need to.
Right, and then how do you manage VM sizes going into Azure?
Yeah, I actually saw that question, and the question is actually related to the automated VM protection. Now, with automated VM protection, you pre-create a VPG and you'll point it to the recovery site. Now, as of Zerto 9, and the way it works right now is as soon as you add VMs to that VPG, they will get the default instance size as configured in that VPG or as available in a VPG. So you can't define it per VM right now. So it will be, actually I'll have to, I'm not sure on the answer what exact instance size we use, but it's you can pre-configure a default instance size, and that's what it will use.
Right, and just to reiterate, and I know we answered this question, but I think there's just a validation in the fact that, if I'm understanding correctly, that immutability copies are not an option for Azure storage today, but it is a capability that's on the roadmap.
100%. As soon as Microsoft delivers the APIs and the ability to do object locks in Azure Blob Storage, we'll be looking at implementing that.
Right, yeah. So I just wanted to reiterate that because a couple of questions on that again came through. Does the long-term retention run copy from the DR site or the primary site?
It could do both, actually. It depends on how you configure it right now. So if you, for example, use Zerto to replicate to a remote site and you enable LTR on that protection group that is replicated remotely, we'll take the long-term retention copy from that remote copy. So zero impact on production. If you do a local copy or use our new protection group type, local continuous backup type, then it will take a copy. It will take the copy from the replica and the journal, but because it's local, it will use that local repository.
Great. I'm just looking at the time here. We're at 2 minutes. Is there any others? There are a few others here. Highs. I don't know whether you've been going through at the last couple of questions.
Sure. Let me quickly take a look at. Well, one of the questions I see is immutability available with Wasabi using Zerto?
Oh, yeah.
That's a great question, because when we now support with Zerto 9 S3 compatible. In Zerto 9, we don't have support for the object lock mechanism in S3 compatible. That's definitely something we're looking into, because it is a standard, and I know it's available in Wasabi, and I know it's available in Cloudian as well, and I believe others, Scality has it available as well. So we're definitely looking into how we can incorporate that in S3 compatible. With Zerto 9, that's not available. Immutability and object locks is only available for AWS S3.
So I think that's all that we've got time for, Highs, and I just want to thank everybody for joining today, and I hope that you got value out of today's webinar and the demos that you saw and the information. But just as a reminder, you can go to zerto.com, and on the homepage there will be a link to the landing page with all of the Zerto 9 content that we have, that you can find out all of the features. And as I say, it is available today, so it is downloadable from My Zerto. And yeah, so appreciate everybody joining, and thank you so much, and talk to you soon. Thanks, Heis.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Caroline.